The Zenith Military Academy floated in geosynchronous orbit above Corellis 9, a diplomatic moon so aggressively pleasant that its primary export was tourism and its secondary export was bragging about how nice the tourism was. The station itself was a monument to galactic cooperation, which is a polite way of saying it was designed by committee, and therefore resembled a crystalline flower that had mated with a parking garage. Approximately 12,000 cadets from 73 species called this architectural confusion home, and they did so with the comfortable certainty that they represented the finest military minds the galaxy had to offer. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. The station's interior maintained a carefully regulated environment that catered to what the Galactic Concordance called standard biological parameters, which meant it was perfectly comfortable for the overwhelming majority of species who had evolved on worlds where the weather was a polite suggestion rather than an active threat. The temperature hovered at a pleasant 20 degrees Celsius. The gravity sat at 0.85 standard G, and the atmospheric composition was a carefully balanced mixture that wouldn't immediately kill anyone important. It was, in every measurable way, a triumph of compromise and engineering. It was also boring as hell, but nobody was going to say that in official documents. Professor Vel'koth occupied Lecture Hall 7 Gamma with the casual authority of someone who had been teaching the same material for 37 cycles and had perfected the art of making exobiology sound both fascinating and completely theoretical. He was Thesian, which meant he resembled what humans might describe as a 6-foot praying mantis wearing reading glasses. Though he would object to this characterization on the grounds that Thesians had evolved their compound eyes millions of years before humanity had figured out how to make glass lenses. His exoskeleton gleamed a pleasant jade color under the lecture hall's lighting, and his forearms moved in practiced gestures as he manipulated the holographic display floating before the assembled students. The lecture hall contained roughly 80 cadets arranged in ascending rows, representing a decent cross-section of Concordance membership. There were Gentari, whose crystalline bodies refracted the ambient light into gentle rainbows across the walls. There were Quelon, aquatic beings who sat in specialized moisture suits that kept their skin from drying out in the station's atmosphere. A handful of Verdani occupied the back corner, their photosynthetic skins soaking up the full-spectrum lighting with visible contentment. Scattered throughout were Drexians, Korthi, Planarians, and at least a dozen other species, all of them paying varying degrees of attention to Vel'koth's lecture. "Today," Vel'koth announced, his mandibles clicking with professorial enthusiasm, "we conclude our unit on mythological, extremophiles, and evolutionary impossibilities. Specifically, we will address the persistent legend of so-called Deathworlders." A few students perked up. Mythology was always more interesting than taxonomy. "The concept of the Deathworlder," Vel'koth continued, pulling up a holographic image of a particularly hostile-looking planet, "has persisted in fringe academic circles and frontier scout reports for approximately 400 standard cycles. The hypothesis suggests that sentient, spacefaring species could evolve on Class 9 or Class 10 worlds, environments so hostile that they actively attempt to kill their inhabitants on a daily basis." Polite chittering and gurgling laughter rippled through the audience. The idea was absurd on its face. "Let us examine why this is biologically implausible," Vel'koth said, warming to his subject. "First, consider the energy expenditure required to survive on such a world. A Class 9 planet, by definition, features multiple catastrophic variables: extreme gravitational variance, unpredictable weather systems, active geological instability, aggressive megafauna, and pathogenic loads that would overwhelm any reasonable immune system. To evolve sentience, a species requires surplus energy for brain development. If every calorie is devoted to simply not dying, intelligence becomes an evolutionary dead end. A Gentari student, her name was Crystalis, raised a fractured limb. "Professor, what about the scout reports from the outer fringe? Didn't they claim to have encountered a persistence predator species?" "Ah, yes," Vel'koth said, his tone suggesting he had been waiting for this question. "The infamous outer fringe reports. Let me be clear. Those documents have been thoroughly analyzed by the Xenobiology Council. The consensus is that the scouts either encountered indigenous fauna and anthropomorphized their behavior, or they experienced sensor malfunctions in regions of space with high background radiation. The described species, a binocular vision persistence hunter with tool use capability and pack bonding instincts, would require a combination of traits that are mutually exclusive from an evolutionary standpoint." He pulled up a new hologram, this one showing a theoretical evolutionary tree. "Consider. Forward-facing eyes evolve in ambush predators who need depth perception. Persistence hunting requires endurance adaptations that sacrifice strength. Tool use demands fine motor control and significant cranial capacity. Pack bonding necessitates complex social structures. For all of these traits to manifest in a single species suggests an evolutionary path so statistically improbable that we can safely dismiss it as impossible." Another student, a Quellan named Rippledeep, whose translator gave him a voice like water over stones, burbled a question. "What about the old archives? Don't they reference apex species from prohibited zones?" "The old archives," Vel'koth said with barely concealed disdain, "are filled with pre-concordant superstitions and unverified claims. Many of those prohibited zones turned out to be navigation hazards or regions with unusual stellar phenomena. The so-called apex species were likely mathematical errors or translation problems. We must remember that our ancestors were significantly less scientifically rigorous than we are today." This earned approving gestures from the assembled students. They were, after all, the beneficiaries of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. They knew better. "Let me be absolutely clear," Vel'koth continued, manipulating the hologram to show a nightmarish Class 10 world complete with volcanic eruptions and what appeared to be storms the size of small continents. For a species to evolve sapience on this type of world, they would need to develop resistance to multiple extinction-level threats simultaneously. They would need redundant biological systems, extraordinary healing capabilities, environmental adaptation beyond anything we've observed, and the psychological fortitude to continue building civilization while their planet actively attempted to murder them. This is, simply put, impossible. Evolution is efficient. It does not create monsters when it can create functional beings. In the third row from the back, slightly off to the left side, sat a cadet who had been listening to this lecture with increasing amusement. Her name was Corporal Mackenzie Reeves, though she went by Mac and had specifically requested that her nameplate use only her surname to avoid drawing attention. She was human, which meant precisely nothing to the other students because they had no frame of reference for what that meant. To the casual observer, Mac was unremarkable. She stood approximately 1.7 meters tall, which put her on the shorter end of the Academy's height distribution. Her body was built in a way that the other species found oddly compact, with a bilateral symmetry that seemed almost aggressive in its precision. She had two eyes, both facing forward in a configuration that several students had privately noted was slightly predatory, but probably harmless. Her skin was a medium brown tone that didn't change color based on mood or environmental factors, which struck many aliens as peculiarly boring. Her hair was black, kept in a tight regulation bun that suggested military discipline. She had been at the academy for 8 months, attending classes with reasonable diligence, scoring in the acceptable range on examinations, and generally blending into the background. Her roommate, a Verdani named Bloomwise, had once commented that Mac was nice enough, but drinks water constantly and maintains a body temperature that would constitute a low-grade fever for most species. Mac had simply smiled, an expression that showed too many teeth and made Bloomwise slightly uncomfortable, and explained that humans needed a lot of hydration. Nobody had thought to question further. Mac had spent the last 6 weeks of Vel'koth's course listening to lectures about why species like hers couldn't possibly exist. She had found it hilarious at first, then educational, and finally somewhat insulting in a way that made her determined to continue keeping her species classification quiet just to see how far the wrongness could go. She had, on at least 3 occasions, nearly broken cover when Vel'koth had described some aspect of human biology as evolutionarily ridiculous, but she had maintained discipline. Today, however, Vel'koth was really pushing it. And finally, the professor said, his mandibles clicking with the satisfaction of someone about to make his definitive point, let us consider the ultimate impossibility. For a species to survive on a true death world, they would need to be apex predators. But here is the central contradiction. Apex predators do not develop advanced tool use because they do not need it. They are already at the top of their food chain. Conversely, species that develop tool use do so because they are prey animals who need to compensate for physical weakness. You cannot have both. You cannot have a species with the hunting instincts of an apex predator combined with the problem-solving capability and social cooperation of a tool-using civilization. It is a biological impossibility. And that is why Deathworlders remain firmly in the realm of myth and legend. Mac's hand went up. The movement was casual, unremarkable. Just a student with a question. Several other cadets didn't even notice. Vel'koth, pleased that his lecture had inspired inquiry, gestured toward her with one of his secondary arms. Yes, Cadet Reeves. Do you have a question? Mac stood, observing the academy protocol, even though she found it slightly silly. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and carried the flat accent of someone who had spent considerable effort neutralizing any regional linguistic markers. Yes, Professor. I was wondering what your hypothesis makes of me? Vel'koth's compound eyes focused on her with the particular attention of a teacher who suspects a student has missed the point. I'm not sure I understand your question, Cadet. Well, Mac said, her tone conversational. You just spent 50 minutes explaining why apex predators from Class 10 death worlds cannot develop sapience, tool use, and spacefaring capability. But I'm from Earth, which is a Class 10 death world. And humans are the Deathworlders everyone seems to think are mythological. So I'm curious how your theory accounts for the fact that I'm standing here. The silence that followed was profound. It was the particular quality of silence that occurs when an entire room of people simultaneously realizes that something has gone terribly wrong, but hasn't yet processed what that something is. Crystallis stopped refracting light. Ripple Deep's water suit made a soft gurgling sound that suggested biological distress. A Drexian student in the front row, whose name was Hardscale, turned approximately 40 degrees to stare at Mac with both sets of eyes. Vel'koth's mandibles stopped clicking. I'm sorry, Cadet Reeves, but I think there's been some confusion. Earth is not classified as a Class 10 world. You're likely thinking of your planet's tourism classification, or perhaps confusing it with another designation. Class 10 worlds are quarantine-level hostile. Yes, Mac said, her tone remaining patient. Earth is quarantined for excessive lethality. Has been for about 3 standard years now, ever since first contact. I can give you the planetary classification code if you'd like to pull up the file. Vel'koth hesitated. This was clearly some kind of joke or misunderstanding. But the cadet seemed serious, and several other students were now paying very close attention. Very well, he said, deciding to demonstrate the error publicly so the lesson would stick. Please provide the classification code. Mac rattled off a string of numbers and letters that Vel'koth entered into the holographic display. The system processed for a moment, then pulled up a file marked with several warning indicators that made his internal organs clench in ways that Thesian biology wasn't supposed to allow. Planet designation, Earth, Sol 3. Classification, Class 10. Deathworld quarantine status, active biological hazard level, extreme native sapient species, human, Homo sapiens. Threat assessment, pending diplomatic review. The hologram expanded, filling the lecture hall with data. Vel'koth stared at it with the expression of someone watching their entire academic career dissolve in real time. This must be a database error, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's not, Max said, and there was something almost apologetic in her tone. Earth really is that hostile. Would you like me to walk you through it? Vel'koth's training as an academic warred with his instinct to trigger the emergency alarm. Curiosity won, but only barely. Please, he said weakly. Mac pulled up a detailed planetary scan that had apparently been added to the database recently. Okay, so starting with the basics. Earth has a gravity approximately 1.3 times what you're calling standard, which is why I've been wearing weighted training gear at the academy. I didn't want to accidentally outperform everyone in physical exercises and cause questions. A Korthi student made a sound like grinding metal. Mac had been wearing weighted training gear, which meant she had been operating at a significant disadvantage, which meant her actual physical capability was considerably higher than anyone had suspected. The planet's atmosphere is 21% oxygen, Mac continued, which I understand is toxic to about half the species here at prolonged exposure. We also have weather systems that casually destroy cities. Hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, monsoons. We have rotating air columns that can toss vehicles around, and wave systems in our oceans that can wipe out coastal settlements. Our tectonic plates are active, so we get regular earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Surely your species lives in protected zones, Vel'koth managed. We live everywhere, Max said. We've got cities on every continent, including the one that's almost entirely ice and where the temperature drops to minus 60 degrees Celsius in winter. We've got settlements in deserts where it hits 50 degrees Celsius in summer. We've got communities in areas with active volcanoes because the soil is good for farming. We're adaptable like that. The hologram showed images now. Human cities built on geological fault lines, human settlements in regions that looked actively hostile, human infrastructure that suggested a species that simply did not care if their planet wanted them dead. Crystallis raised a fractured limb with a gesture that suggested deep concern. Cadet Reeves, you mentioned your planet is 70% covered in water. Is that water radioactive or acidic? Oh no, Max said cheerfully. It's just regular water. Well, salt water in the oceans, fresh water in the lakes and rivers. We drink it, swim in it, build cities next to it. It's great. You swim in it, Rippledeep repeated, his translator struggling with the concept. Voluntarily? For fun, Mac confirmed. It's considered a recreational activity. We also boat on it, surf on it, and some humans dive deep into it wearing specialized equipment. The ocean has some pretty cool creatures. Such as? Vel'koth asked, dreading the answer. Mac thought about it. Well, we've got sharks, which are apex predators with multiple rows of teeth that can sense electromagnetic signals. We've got saltwater crocodiles that can weigh over a ton and kill prey by drowning them. We've got various species of jellyfish whose stings can kill you. Oh, and we've got blue-ringed octopi, which are tiny and adorable and contain enough venom to kill 26 adult humans. And you swim with these creatures? I mean, we try to avoid the dangerous ones, Max said reasonably. But sometimes they show up anyway. That's just life on Earth. Vel'koth made a decision to just keep going, hoping that at some point this would start making sense. Your initial statement suggested that humans are apex predators. Can you elaborate? Sure, Max said. And there was something in her casual tone that made several students unconsciously move away from her. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to chase prey over long distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. A healthy human can run a marathon, which is about 42 kilometers, in a few hours. Elite runners can do it in just over 2 hours. We can maintain a jogging pace for hours or even days if properly trained and supplied. A Verdany student leaf whisper made a sound like rustling paper in distress. Days? Our bodies are built for it, Mac explained. We've got a cooling system that uses evaporative liquid excretion through our skin, which is way more efficient than panting. We've got spring-loaded tendons in our legs for energy conservation. We've got the ability to regulate our breathing independently of our stride, unlike quadrupeds. Basically, we can chase prey in the heat of the day, when other predators have to rest, and we can keep going long after they've exhausted themselves. But surely this is a historical adaptation, Vel'koth said desperately. Modern humans don't actually do this. Some still do in traditional communities, but mostly we turned it into entertainment. We have running races, including ultra-marathons that are over 100 kilometers. Some humans do multi-day running events for fun. We also have triathlons, which combine running, swimming, and cycling. We do this recreationally. The silence was back, and it had brought friends. Mac, sensing she had already blown whatever cover she'd been maintaining, decided to just commit fully. You also mentioned binocular vision, Professor. That's because our eyes face forward for depth perception, which is an adaptation for tracking and catching prey. We're one of the few species on Earth that can throw objects with ballistic accuracy, which we used for hunting and warfare. Human children develop throwing accuracy at remarkably young ages. What about tool use? Crystalis asked, her voice crystalline with barely suppressed panic. You said apex predators don't develop tools. Well, we're the exception, Max said. We've got fine motor control and opposable thumbs, which let us manipulate objects with precision. We started making tools about 2.5 million years ago. Stone tools, then metal tools, then complex machines. We went from controlling fire to splitting atoms in less than 1 million years, and from first powered flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. Your species weaponized nuclear fission? Hardscale asked, his scales actually standing on end in alarm. And fusion, Max said. Also, we invented dynamite, automatic weapons, guided missiles, biological weapons, chemical weapons, and railguns. We're really good at making things that kill other things efficiently. It's kind of our specialty. Vel'koth pulled up more data files, his hands trembling slightly. The first contact reports, he muttered. I need to access the first contact reports. Mac winced. Yeah, those are probably pretty alarming. We didn't know we were unusual until we met you guys. We thought everyone was like us. Turns out our light greeting customs sent several diplomats to medical facilities. The handshake incident. Vel'koth read from the file, his voice hollow. Human delegation greeted Concordance representatives with a friendly handshake, resulting in 3 fractured appendages and 2 dislocated joints. In our defense, Max said quickly, we were being gentle. That's considered a polite, non-aggressive greeting on Earth. The backslap incident. Vel'koth continued reading. Human ambassador congratulated successful trade negotiation by slapping the planarian representative on the back in celebration, resulting in spinal compression and temporary paralysis. Again, that's a friendly gesture, Max said. We've since learned to be way more careful. It's why we wear these badges now. She tapped the red warning badge on her uniform that most students had assumed was some kind of military designation. It warns people that we're from a high-gravity world and to be cautious during physical contact. A Drexian student raised a claw. How strong are you exactly? Mac considered. Well, I can comfortably lift about 80 kilograms, which is roughly my body weight. Trained human athletes can lift several times their body weight. The current deadlift record on Earth is over 500 kilograms. Multiple students made sounds of distress. But that's not really our scary feature, Mac continued, warming to the subject now that she'd committed to explaining. Our scary feature is our regenerative capability. We heal from injuries that would kill most species. Broken bones knit back together, usually stronger than before. We've got automatic blood clotting systems that seal wounds. Our immune systems fight off pathogens aggressively, usually by raising our body temperature to kill heat-sensitive invaders. We call that a fever, and it's a feature, not a bug. How high can your body temperature rise? Aquelon asked nervously. Normal is about 37 Celsius. Fever can push 40 or above. We've had people survive core body temperatures over 42 degrees, though that requires immediate medical intervention. That would denature our proteins, Rippledeep burbled in horror. Yeah, we've got pretty robust proteins, Mac agreed. We also have an emergency response system called an adrenaline dump. When we're threatened or injured, our bodies flood with a hormone that temporarily boosts our strength, dulls pain reception, increases our reaction time, and sharpens our focus. Basically, when a human is in danger, they become more dangerous. Vel'koth sat down heavily in his chair. The pack bonding instinct mentioned in the reports? Oh, that's real, Max said. Humans form emotional attachments easily and strongly. We pack bonded with wolves and turned them into dogs, which are now our most common companion animals. We've domesticated hundreds of species. We also form attachments to inanimate objects. Humans will name their vehicles, their weapons, their tools. We'll form emotional bonds with robots. We get attached to each other really easily, too. Is that why you've been so friendly? Crystallis asked suspiciously. I mean, I genuinely like you guys, Max said. You're interesting, and we've had good conversations. But yes, humans tend to pack bond with teammates, classmates, co-workers, and anyone we spend significant time with. It's instinctive. We're a social species. A long pause followed this revelation. Then Leaf Whisper asked the question everyone was thinking. How many humans are there? Mac hesitated. As of last census, about 8.3 billion. The sound that erupted from the assembled students was difficult to describe. Several needed immediate medical attention. Crystallis cracked down her entire left side. Rippledeep's moisture suit began recycling rapidly, suggesting hyperventilation. Hard scales simply froze, which was apparently a Drexian defense mechanism. That's just on Earth, Mac added. We've also colonized our moon, Mars, and several asteroid bases. We're working on terraforming Venus. The population is growing pretty steadily. 8 billion apex predators from a Class 10 death world, Vel'koth said, staring at nothing. With nuclear weapons and a space program. And we're friendly, Mac emphasized. That's important. We passed all the concordant psychological evaluations. We're not interested in conquest or aggression. We just want to join the galactic community, make some friends, maybe trade technologies. We're really excited about the whole not being alone in the universe thing. Your species discovered you weren't alone and your reaction was excitement? Acorthy asked in disbelief. Most species' first reaction to learning about aliens was existential terror. Well, yeah, Max said. We've been wondering if we were alone for thousands of years. Finding out there's a whole galactic community out here was amazing. Our scientists cried. Our artists started making celebration art. Our leaders immediately started working on diplomatic protocols. We were thrilled. Vel'koth pulled himself together with visible effort. Cadet Reeves, you said you've been at the Academy for 8 months. Why did you not mention this before? Mac shrugged. A gesture that made several students flinch because they'd just learned she had significantly more muscle mass than they'd assumed. I was told to assimilate naturally and not make a big deal about Earth's classification. The integration officials wanted humans to prove we could operate in mixed species environments without causing problems. I figured everyone knew and just wasn't bringing it up to be polite. You thought we knew you were from a species we believed was mythological. I mean, I'm literally standing here, Mac pointed out. I exist. I figured the whole Deathworlders aren't real thing was just an academic exercise or a philosophical debate. I didn't realize you actually thought we were impossible. How have you been managing the Academy's physical requirements? Hardscale asked. You've been scoring in the acceptable range on all fitness evaluations. I've been sandbagging, Mac admitted. Wearing weighted gear, limiting my performance to match the class average. I didn't want to show off. Plus, honestly, the Academy's physical training is pretty light by Earth military standards. Our basic training is way more intense. How much more intense? Rippledeep asked with morbid curiosity. Well, Earth military basic training lasts weeks and includes forced marches with heavy packs, obstacle courses, hand-to-hand combat practice, exposure to tear gas to build tolerance, sleep deprivation to test performance under stress, and survival exercises. We do this to teenagers. It's considered normal. You expose your young to chemical weapons? Crystalis was nearly vibrating with distress. In controlled settings, yeah. We figure it's better to know how you react to that stuff in training rather than finding out in combat. Same reason we practice getting punched in the face. You practice being injured? It's called sparring. We hit each other in controlled circumstances to learn how to fight and how to take a hit. It's mandatory in most military training programs. Also really popular as recreational activity. We have entire sports leagues built around humans punching, kicking, or grappling each other. Vel'koth pulled up another file. The report mentions humans engage in extreme sports for entertainment. Oh yeah, Max said, her face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. We jump off cliffs with fabric wings, climb mountains without oxygen, dive into caves, surf massive waves, ski down avalanche-prone slopes, and race vehicles at dangerous speeds. We do all kinds of stuff that could kill us. It's fun. Fun, Vel'koth repeated numbly. Humans have a risk assessment system that's kind of broken, Mac explained. We do something called calculated risk, where we look at a potentially deadly activity and decide the thrill is worth the danger. We've also got this cultural concept where someone says, "Hold my beer," before doing something incredibly stupid and dangerous. It's sort of become a meme. A meme? Leaf Whisper asked. Cultural information packet that spreads through our population. We use them for humor, social commentary, and sometimes political discourse. They evolve rapidly. It's a whole thing. The students were trying to process this information and failing. One species could not possibly contain this many alarming characteristics. What do humans do for relaxation? Someone asked. Depends on the human, Max said. Some read books, some watch entertainment media, some play games, either physical sports or digital simulations. Some create art. Some cook elaborate meals, some garden. We've got a lot of hobbies. Cooking? Vel'koth asked, latching onto something that sounded harmless. We're omnivores, Mac explained. We can digest plant and animal matter. We've developed thousands of cuisines based on regional ingredients and cultural preferences. Some of our food is considered extreme, though. How extreme? Well, we eat things called peppers that contain a chemical called capsaicin, which triggers pain receptors. We've bred peppers specifically to be more painful. We have competitions to see who can eat the most painful peppers. Some humans consume capsaicin for every meal. We consider it a flavor enhancer. You consume pain for entertainment, Hardscale said flatly. We also consume ethanol, which is technically a poison because it produces euphoria in sublethal doses. We call it alcohol, and we've built entire industries around producing and consuming it. We've been doing this for thousands of years. Your species discovered a poison and decided to drink it? Crystallis asked. We discovered lots of poisons and decided to drink them, Mac corrected. Alcohol, caffeine, nicotine. We also learned to process plants like cassava and almonds that are naturally toxic. If something can be made edible, humans will figure out how to eat it. We're adaptable like that. Vel'koth was reading more files now, his compound eyes scanning rapidly. The report mentions that humans have domesticated predator species. Dogs? Mac confirmed. We took wolves, which were competing apex predators, and selectively bred them into hundreds of specialized varieties. Some for hunting, some for protection, some for herding, some just for companionship. We've been doing this for at least 15,000 years. Dogs are now humanity's best friend. We emotionally bond with them on a fundamental level. You pack bonded with another apex predator? We pack bond with everything, Max said. We've domesticated cats, which are obligate carnivores and micro-apex predators. We keep them in our homes, let them sleep in our beds. We've domesticated horses, which are prey animals but can kill a human with a single kick. We've domesticated cattle, pigs, chickens, goats, sheep. We've semi-domesticated dozens of other species. If it exists, humans will probably try to make friends with it. This is insane, a Planarian student whispered. This is humanity, Mac corrected gently. We're survival specialists from a world that tried really hard to kill us. We adapted. We thrived. We built civilizations and environments that would kill most of you in hours. And then we looked at the stars and decided we wanted to see what else was out there. Vel'koth closed the data files. His worldview had been shattered, reconstructed, and shattered again. How many other humans are in the academy? Currently, 47, Max said. Scattered across different programs and specializations. We're integrating slowly, proving we can work and learn alongside other species without causing problems. So far, it's going pretty well. Are they all like you? Mac considered. I'm pretty average, actually. Maybe slightly below average in terms of physical capability. I'm a decent shot, good at logistics, okay at hand-to-hand combat. There are way scarier humans than me. The thought of scarier humans existing somewhere in the galaxy was too much for several students to handle. Acorthi raised a claw hesitantly. What is humanity's military capability? Classified, Max said immediately. But I can tell you we've never lost a war against our own planet, which is really saying something given that Earth has been actively trying to kill us for our entire evolutionary history. Do humans have natural weapons? Crystallis asked. Claws, venom, armor. Not really, Max said. We've got fingernails and teeth, but they're not particularly dangerous compared to Earth's actual predators. Our weapon is our brain. We make tools. Really good tools. Tools that let us dominate every ecosystem on our planet. Tools that let us leave our planet entirely. We're adaptable, creative, and really good at solving problems. Especially if the problem is, how do we kill that thing that's trying to kill us? That's horrifying, Leaf Whisper said. That's survival, Mac countered. Earth is beautiful, but it's harsh. Species either adapt or die. Humanity adapted. We learned to work together, to share knowledge, to build on previous generations' innovations. We went from stone tools to spacecraft. We're pretty proud of that. Vel'koth stood slowly. Class is dismissed, he said, his voice distant. I need to revise the entire curriculum. Cadet Reeves, please report to the Dean's office. We have significant documentation to update. The students filed out in silence, giving Mac a wide berth. She noticed Crystallis actually took a different exit to avoid passing too close. Ripple Deep's water suit was recycling at maximum capacity. Hardscale's scales were still standing on end. Mac gathered her belongings, which included a water bottle that held nearly 2 liters because humans needed constant hydration, and made her way to the door. Vel'koth stopped her with a gesture. Cadet Reeves, he said quietly. Are humans truly peaceful? Mac met his compound eyes steadily. Humans are capable of extraordinary violence, she said honestly. But we're also capable of extraordinary compassion. We've fought wars, yes, but we've also built hospitals. We've created weapons, but we've also created art. We're complicated. But the fact that we passed all your psychological evaluations should tell you something. We chose to be better than our worst impulses. We chose cooperation over conquest. We chose to reach out in friendship rather than hostility. Why? Because we spent our entire history fighting each other and nearly destroyed ourselves several times, Max said. We learned the hard way that working together produces better outcomes than conflict. When we discovered we weren't alone in the universe, we decided to apply that lesson on a galactic scale. We want to be part of the community. We want to learn from you and share what we know. We're dangerous, Professor, but we're not monsters. Vel'koth nodded slowly. I believe I need to reassess a great many assumptions about evolutionary biology. Probably a good idea, Mac agreed. For what it's worth, I really have enjoyed your lectures. The section on crystalline-based photosynthesis was fascinating. She left the lecture hall, and Vel'koth stood alone among the empty seats, staring at the holographic display that still showed Earth spinning slowly in space. Class 10 Deathworld, home to 8 billion apex predators who had decided to be friendly. The galaxy, he reflected, had just become much more interesting and significantly more terrifying. Mac made her way through the station's corridors, noticing how other cadets suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere when they saw her coming. Word traveled fast in an enclosed environment. By the time she reached the cafeteria, the rumors had already evolved into wild speculation. She found another human cadet sitting at a corner table, eating what the station's food synthesizers approximated as a hamburger. His nameplate read Torres, and he looked up with a knowing grin when Mac approached. "Heard you blew our cover in xenobiology," Torres said around a bite of synthetic beef. Vel'koth was really committed to the whole Deathworlders are mythological argument, Mac said, dropping into a seat. I couldn't let it slide. Fair. How'd they take it? About how you'd expect. Crystalis cracked her left side. Multiple students needed medical attention. I think I gave Vel'koth an existential crisis. Torres laughed. The integration committee is going to love this. They told us to assimilate naturally. And nothing says natural like revealing your species is the galaxy's boogeyman. Mac grinned. We were going to have to tell them eventually. Might as well get it over with. True. Plus, now we don't have to sandbag in physical training anymore. Silver lining. They ate in companionable silence for a moment. Around them, the cafeteria's usual noise had diminished. Other species were watching the two humans with barely concealed fascination and fear. Think they'll get used to us? Torres asked. Eventually, Mac said. Humans are good at making friends. We're persistent like that. Persistence hunters. Exactly. Torres raised his water bottle in a mock toast. To humanity. Scaring the galaxy one lecture hall at a time. Mac clinked her bottle against his. We try. Across the cafeteria, Crystalis was explaining to a group of stunned students that, yes, humans were real. Yes, they were as terrifying as the ancient report suggested. And no, panicking wouldn't help because there were 47 of them on the station, and they all seemed disturbingly friendly. In his office, Dean Spiralthorn was receiving a priority communication from the Concordance Diplomatic Corps asking why nobody had thought to warn the Academy population that they had admitted members of a species previously believed to be extinct or mythological. In the station's gymnasium, a Drexian instructor was recalibrating all the physical fitness standards after learning that the humans had been operating at a significant disadvantage. And in her quarters, Mac was writing a message home to Earth, letting her family know that her cover had been blown, but everything was fine and she'd probably be featured in several xenobiology textbooks now. The galaxy had spent thousands of years building a comfortable consensus about what was possible and what was myth. They had decided that certain species simply could not exist because evolution wouldn't allow it. They had dismissed the old reports, called them exaggerations, filed them away as interesting but irrelevant. And then humanity had shown up, polite and friendly, and absolutely delighted to meet alien species, and hadn't mentioned that they were the monsters everyone thought were make-believe. Somewhere on Earth, in the human integration offices, a bureaucrat was updating the first contact protocols to include a line about maybe mentioning the whole death world thing earlier in the introduction process. It seemed like the kind of detail that shouldn't come as a surprise 8 months into an exchange program. But in typical human fashion, even after revealing themselves as apex predators from a planet that actively tried to murder them on a daily basis, the human cadets continued showing up to class, completing their assignments, and being aggressively friendly to their increasingly nervous classmates. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They persevered. They made the best of impossible situations. They turned evolutionary pressure into evolutionary advantage, hostile environments into homes, and predators into pets. And when they encountered a galaxy that had convinced itself that species like humanity couldn't exist, They politely raised their hands and asked what that made them. The Zenith Military Academy would never be quite the same. But then again, neither would the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they'd brought their Deathworld instincts, their pack-bonding tendencies, their terrifying biology, and their inexplicable enthusiasm for making friends with absolutely everything. The universe was going to have to adjust. And somewhere in the Academy's database, a notation was quietly added to Earth's planetary file. Diplomatic note. Humans are aware they are terrifying. They think it's funny. Proceed with cautious optimism. Which, all things considered, was probably the most human thing of all.